Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Wildlife Worldwide Discover Wildlife evening. This, as you can see from the presentation welcome slide, this is a part 2 presentation to help you discover Canada. We've already had some messages come through from a number of people asking if it's possible to get a copy of part 1, the presentation that we did. We did that about 3 weeks ago. And yes, the answer is quite simply yes for that. If you would like to see part 1, if you did miss it, then just send us an email or send Sue an email, or you can drop us a message using the chat function, which is at the bottom of your screen if you're using a PC, or I think it's at the top of the screen if you're using a tablet or a Mac. And you can just drop us a message that way and just request that we send you a link to view a copy of part 1. Part 1, incidentally, it mainly covered topics surrounding British Columbia. We did talk about a couple of other things as well. But the response that we had from that talk was really positive, and there are lots of questions and lots of requests to talk about some of the other wildlife viewing that is available in Canada and some of the other areas that are possible to visit there with us as well. So we thought we would put this part 2 together. Chris Breen is with us this evening. Good evening, Chris. Are you there?
Yes, I am, Nick.
He
Good
is
evening.
There. He is there.
I am.
That's great.
I have a weird thing going on my screen. Yeah.
Brilliant.
But
So Chris, you're Mr. Canada at Wildlife Worldwide, amongst many other Misters, for that matter. As I said, yeah, you spoke about 3 weeks ago about British Columbia, and this evening you'll be touching on British Columbia, I'm sure. But you're going to be talking about many of the other areas in the country to visit as well. So we're looking forward to that. I should say, Chris, just before you get started, I mentioned to you all the chat function, which you can use as a way of just letting us know, for example, that you want to see part 1. You can use that to drop us a question as well. There is also, not wishing to confuse the situation, there is also a question and answer function in the webinar as well. So again, if you find that toolbar that's either at the bottom or the top of your screen, there's a Q&A button, and you can drop questions to us that way as well. And what we'll try to do is get through as many of the questions as we can at the end. We'll leave all those to the end if that's okay, and we'll do our very best to answer as many of those as possible. But that's 2 ways you can get hold of us if you wish to drop us a question. Just before we do get to the questions, I will be asking a question of you all, just in case you want to receive some information from us. We've got a choice of trips that we're going to put to you, and you can select which of those trips you'd like to receive some information from us on. And without and with any luck, the talk that Chris is about to do will inspire you and whet your appetite to want to know a little bit more about those trips. So Chris, what I'm going to do, I'm going to hand over to you.
Cool.
We're not expecting any technical problems, but if we do get any turbulence, then just sit tight and bear with us. We'll try and get through it. But Chris, I'm going to hand over to you and allow you to walk us through the delights of some new areas of Canada that we haven't heard about.
The delights of Canada, eh? Great stuff, Nick. Thank you very, very much indeed. So yeah, look, this is very much designed as being a bit of a part 2, to there will be some repetition, a little bit of repetition, so forgive me for that. I will cover 1 or 2 places again that I covered previously, but in a little bit more detail. And because British Columbia is such a fantastic part of the country, I will mention BC a little bit at the end as well, but not in nearly so much detail as I mentioned it before. It's one of those places that can be combined with all sorts of other lovely parts of Canada, and it seems a shame not to mention it at all. So I will first of all try and, there we go. So first of all, going to our map, let me see if I can use my mouse and point out one or two places. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse. I'm kind of hoping that you can, but you might not be able to. So forgive me if you can't. I'll give you directions anyway. I am going to talk first of all about the Bay of Fundy, which is down in the bottom right-hand side of the map, southeast corner of the map. It is just very slightly west of Halifax. So we're going to have a little bit of a look at that part of Canada. Then we are going to go here to Quebec and the St. Lawrence area. We are then going to go up to Pond Inlet, to Baffin Island and Pond Inlet. Have a bit of a look up here. We're then going to come across, or I guess south and slightly west, to Churchill. Have a bit of a look at Churchill. We're then going to go up to just pretty much on the Arctic Circle to have a look at Bear Cave Mountain. And then we're going to come down into the very northern reaches of British Columbia and look at a place called Taku River. So a couple of those places I spoke about previously, but mostly not, because I was primarily concentrating last time. If you were on board, I suspect some of you were. I was primarily concentrating on the Great Bear Rainforest, which is Vancouver Island, sort of up to Klemtu and so on. So I'll put my mouse away, hoping that you were able to see that. And with any luck, we will get to the Bay of Fundy. Bay of Fundy is a really magnificent part of the country, very, very pretty part of the country, bordering USA. And bordering Maine in the United States. Although I've been to Maine only very briefly, literally in order to access one of the islands in the Bay of Fundy, which is right down in the let's get my mouse again. Right down here, a place called Campobello Island. Which you can go to by boat from St Andrews, or you can go across by road, which is a rather more convoluted way of doing it. But generally speaking, we would go there by boat. So mention of the Bay of Fundy. In order to get there, you can fly into Halifax, direct services out of the UK, or you could fly into St John. Which is not to be confused with St John's over to the east in Newfoundland. I have made that error once in the past, many years ago, and not with Wildlife Worldwide, you will be delighted to hear. Anyway, you fly into either Halifax or into St John. The Bay of Fundy is a wonderful place to self-drive. Lovely, big, wide roads, lots of super places to stay, lots of really lovely things to see along the way. St Andrews is a pretty town, and St Andrews is right on the bay. St Andrews is the place from which all of the main whale watching operates. I say all of the main whale watching. In fact, that's not entirely correct. Watching an island in the bay as well, which is an island called Grand Manan. This particular picture is taken at a place called Campobello Roosevelt, and Campobello Island was the summer home, or rather President Roosevelt, as was, created a summer residence on Campobello Island. And his summer residence has been turned into some absolutely beautiful accommodation. You can see the Bay of Fundy out here in front of us here. And we, on a number of our trips, if we're organising self-drive trips, and the occasional group trip, which we've done in the past, we ran a Festival of Wales to the Bay of Fundy 2 or 3 years ago, but we'll make use of this rather beautiful place to stay. The accommodation here is absolutely super. This is Roosevelt Cottage. We can go whale watching directly from the grounds of this magnificent estate, where there's also really super bird watching and some great photographic opportunities here as well. But it's just a nice place to stay, and it makes a change from staying in St Andrews, which is also a really lovely place to stay too. The Bay of Fundy is has a very rich coastline. There are some lovely seabird colonies. There are lots of, and I fully appreciate this isn't wildlife, but rather nice anyway. There are little fishing villages. There's some lovely lighthouses that have been converted into accommodations. There are similarities in my mind to, if you're self-driving here, to self-driving in somewhere like Devon or Cornwall, but with a different range of mammals and birds. One of them, if you were whale watching from Grand Manan Island, which is a really super thing to do, one of them to see will be the Atlantic white-sided dolphins. And every time I've been out from Grand Manan, which is a number of times now, I've been there 3 or 4 times, and each time I've been out whale watching from Grand Manan, I have seen Atlantic white-sided dolphins. On the occasion of taking this photograph, I think the pod consisted of about 100 or 150 Atlantic white-sided dolphins, and they are pretty special animals. They are really very, very beautiful, and they're very fast as well. So they're not necessarily the easiest thing to photograph. Of course, one of the key reasons why people come here is in order to see North Atlantic right whale, which is one of the most endangered whales on Earth. There are thought to be between, I think, about 280 and 380 North Atlantic right whales that remain. They were hunted heavily, of course, many years ago. And more recently, these North Atlantic right whales, of course, for many years, I should say, they have been breeding in the waters of the Bay of Fundy. They come here in the summer months, but it's a busy shipping channel, and many have been hit over the years and have died as a result of that. There was a big campaign some years ago to actually change the shipping channels so that the big ships would be able to avoid the North Atlantic right whales, and that was very successful. So I'm not quite sure what the present numbers of North Atlantic right whales is, probably around about 300, but they are wonderful animals to see, and the time to go and see them, the time that they're there, is August and September. They have this very distinctive blow, which you can see from a great distance away, and the blow is almost a heart shape, so it's very attractive. I think whale watching, but I have managed to see North Atlantic right whales on each of the visits that I've made, and on each of the whale watching trips that I've been on from there. So we'll move across to, or north in fact, to Quebec. And Quebec combines very nicely with the Bay of Fundy. If you look geographically, the Bay of Fundy is largely sits between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. And of course, New Brunswick immediately borders Quebec. And the big channel you can see there is the big channel you can see here, of course, is the St. Lawrence and the St. Lawrence River, which comes down here, which is again great for whales and great for whale watching. This particular peninsula is called the Gaspé Peninsula, and this has some wonderful wildlife viewing here. There's a big caribou herd that is found here, and there are bear watching opportunities on the north side of the on the northern side of the St. Lawrence. So well worth considering, and well worth considering a combination of the Bay of Fundy and also Quebec, which, as I say, work very nicely as a self-drive. Getting to Quebec is very straightforward. You can fly into Montreal, you can fly into Ottawa, and of course you can fly into Quebec City. Or you can self-drive up from the Bay of Fundy. I mentioned Tadoussac and I mentioned the St. Lawrence. They are worth mentioning because the whale watching opportunities here are really super. And on the one or two occasions when I've been, I have stayed in this hotel, Hotel Tadoussac, imaginatively named Hotel Tadoussac. It's actually a beautiful hotel. I guess it's kind of an old colonial, it's a colonial style hotel, which in its own curious way feels a little bit like the Victoria Falls Hotel in Zimbabwe, or not quite as plush as Raffles in Singapore. On the plus side, however, from the gardens of this rather lovely hotel, you can see out into the St. Lawrence, and will regularly see whales if you're there in our summer months, so July, August, September, and perhaps into early October as well. There is a completely different style of accommodation in Quebec too, and of course everything in between, beautiful bed and breakfast and so on as well, but pre-established camping in some rather superb campsites in Quebec is also a very real possibility, and something which I've done. The camping units are extremely comfortable with full cooking facilities and heating and so on and so forth, and private barbecues and places to eat. Fully appreciate this is not everybody's cup of tea at all, but it is an option, and it's quite a nice way to do it if self-driving is a possibility for you. Harbour seal, of which there are plenty, and whale watching in the St. Lawrence is done in a number of different ways. In addition to going out in zodiacs, of course, these are very different to the zodiacs that we use on our expedition voyages, which generally speaking will only accommodate 10. These much larger zodiacs, much larger and much more powerful zodiacs, will accommodate, I would say, 20 or so people, very skillfully piloted by extremely knowledgeable naturalists who are at least bilingual, if not trilingual. Of course, they speak French, of course, which is their native language in that particular part of Canada, but also perfect English, unlike. And for example, on one 3-hour trip, whale watching trip that I did from here, we had 5 different species of whale, from smallest to biggest. Beluga, and the beluga whales are plentiful in the Tadoussac area, and they are here year round. We also had minke whale, which is what we're looking at here, and had many minke whales in that 3-hour trip. We had plentiful humpbacks as well. We also had fin whale, which is the second largest whale on Earth. To be fair, not particularly good views of fin whale on this trip that I'm describing, but also blue whale. And we had many blue whales. Sorry, that's not true. We had three blue whales, I think, or 4 blue whales, but the sightings were absolutely superb. There is also the possibility to go whale watching here in the evening. You can go on larger boats. You don't just have to go on these Zodiacs. There are larger boats to go whale watching on. And I would certainly recommend at least a 2 or 3 day stay here in Tadoussac in order to go whale watching and walking along the coast. There's a lovely coastline. It's very, very nice just to perhaps take a drink and sit on the rocks as the sun's going down and watch the whales out in the St. Lawrence. Which we did. You can also canoe. We kayaked in 2-man Canadian kayaks. It was a slightly eerie feeling because it was quite misty. But we, on one occasion, heard this most magnificent blow, which we knew was a blue whale, about the size of a Boeing 737 out in the distance. And then we saw it emerge. We just saw the back of this blue whale, perhaps 50 meters or so away from us. That's pretty exciting when you're in a canoe. So that was really wonderful. So I would strongly recommend this part of the world as being a place to visit and a place to enjoy for whale watching. Now, in my previous Canadian presentation 2 or 3 weeks ago, we did go to Baffin Island, but I'm going to describe Baffin to you again. There may be some of you on board this evening who weren't with us 2 or 3 weeks ago. If you were on board last time, forgive me, I'm going to speak. There will be some images that you'll see that are the same, but hopefully you'll see some more as well. But in order to get to Baffin, with any luck, you'll be able to see my annotation. Apologies if you can't, but in order to get to Baffin, what we do is we fly into Ottawa, which is here, and we then overnight in Ottawa. From Ottawa, we fly north to a place called Iqaluit, and from Iqaluit, we fly north again to a place called Pond Inlet. Pond Inlet is an interesting place. Sorry, this is the flight from Iqaluit to Pond Inlet. Iqaluit, beg your pardon, Pond Inlet is an interesting place. It's another. There's something very attractive about a lot of these remote Arctic locations. They look very beautiful in their background. It may have something to do with the extraordinary clarity of the air, but I always think they look so unbelievably beautiful. So it's a colourful town. It's a small town. It's in a remarkably remote place. This is the library, which is perched. It appears to be perched almost on stilts, which I guess it is. It has about 30 kilometres of sea ice out in front of it. And this sea ice, of course, is frozen for much of the year. We get there, is May and possibly early June. And what we do is we organise ourselves in or on, depending on how you look at it, skidoos, which in actual fact our guides drive, and we're pulled along behind the skidoos in these rather magnificent giant shoeboxes, really, is what they look like. And we skidoo from Pond Inlet to effectively to the flow edge, which is the edge of the ice, where the ice is basically breaking up and gradually turning into sea. It's about a 2 to 2.5 hour journey in these giant shoeboxes. We're sat in the shoebox on the back on the sledge, as you can see, with the guides driving the skidoos. Fantastic experience, and really great fun. And then we eventually get to camp. Camp is close to flow edge. Camp is set up for just 3 or 4 weeks, and we are camping. I mean, they are tents. They are triple line tents, so they're with heaters in them, so they're extremely warm. They are quite simple, as you can imagine. There is also a mess tent, and there's a shower tent and a toilet tent. So it's a simple operation, but they're perfectly comfortable, and they are extremely warm. The guides here are fantastic. They really know where the wildlife is. They know where to find it. They know how to get to it. They are extremely interesting guys. The fact of the matter is that, of course, when they're not guiding tourists, such as ourselves, they are hunting, but they are subsistence hunting. They're hunting for food. And there's all sorts of interesting things to see here, including, of course, eiders and all sorts of interesting other birds, gulls and various things. There are some interesting cultural sites as well, which they take us to, some of them which are a tad eerie. There is the opportunity, if the weather's nice, to kayak at flow edge, and the possibility of seeing whales when you're kayaking. But the key thing here is whale watching. And the key thing here is the opportunity to see, hopefully, bowhead whales, which feed literally on the edge of the ice. And this particular bowhead whale really took us by surprise. We had no idea that it was around. We had no idea that it was in the immediate vicinity. And all of a sudden, it appeared very, very close to us. And it hung around for, I would say, 25 or 30 minutes. Bear in mind, we are now in the land of the midnight sun, so to speak, or to coin a phrase. And it's really quite amazing to be out. We try to keep sort of what would be described as normal hours. But there were one or two occasions when we were out here where everybody wanted to stay out late and just sit and watch and wait and see whether other whales turned up. This particular bowhead was especially friendly, to the point that with this particular guy who was on our trip was able to literally lie down on the ice right at the edge of the flow. The other reason for coming here is for the possibility to see narwhal. Now, I can't claim that this photograph and the next photograph are mine. So these were taken by another pal who was on the trip, the same trip that I was on. We were a little bit unlucky on my trip. We didn't see quite so many narwhal. Well, in fact, we saw quite a few female narwhal, but not so many males. There were a couple of males. But this, of course, is, I guess, is the prize, to see male narwhal, and furthermore, to see male narwhal but we did have a couple of good sightings. They were quite distant, but we had a couple of good sightings. But it's a very, very exciting place to visit, and a place that I would highly recommend. That if you're looking for somewhere different and somewhere new, somewhere exciting, somewhere that you never dreamed you might consider visiting, I would strongly recommend it. It's a really super place to go to. The other thing that you might consider in in this particular part of the world, of course, is polar bears, of which there are many. And although we don't see the polar bears too often, there are polar bears around. There's plenty of polar bears around, and we do see them. That, of course, is the very neat segue into the polar bears of Churchill. Now, I've been to Churchill, but I can't claim that these photographs are mine. So these are photographs that have been loaned to me by some colleagues in Canada. There's some super shots here of bears. Churchill is the self-proclaimed polar bear capital of the world. There are a number of places, of course, where we can see polar bears. And I suspect a number of you were on the talk a couple of nights ago, which Mark Cowardian gave about Wrangel Island, where we also have fantastic polar bears. And of course, you can see polar bears in Svalbard and a number of other places as well, Alaska, of course, and elsewhere. This particular location, Churchill, is a commonly visited place for polar bears. It's pretty easy to get to. It's in that sense, therefore, busy by comparison with other polar bear locations that we travel to. It's busier than Svalbard, it's busier than, it's considerably busier than Wrangel Island, but that doesn't mean to say that it's not good, because it is absolutely fantastic. And this is polar bear viewing from vehicles as opposed to from vessels. In order to get to Churchill, we fly into Winnipeg, which is central on the map, as you'll see there. And then we fly north to Churchill. The best time to visit Churchill for polar bears, really the only time to visit polar bear for Churchills, to see them on ice, is in October and November, because at that point, the Hudson Bay has frozen over. And in actual fact, looks like a barren wasteland, I suppose, in some respects, but it's not really. It really is a place that's rich with bears, as this sign rather suggests. The town itself isn't particularly special, if the truth be known, but because you're far north and because you're there in October, November time, there is a very good chance that you will see the Northern Lights, which is a really fabulous thing to see. Perhaps you will see them as beautifully as this. And there's two different ways to enjoy a polar bear safari in Churchill. One is to stay in one of the motels that's in Churchill, of which there are a number, and we use a number of different motels in Churchill. And the other is to stay in what's known as Tundra Lodge. So the difference between the two, of course, is that the motel is static and the Tundra Lodge isn't, although it would be static for the duration of your stay. Tundra Lodge is set up about an hour and a half away from Churchill town. And that's quite deliberate. So Tundra Lodge is deliberately set up much closer to where the bears are. And that's a good thing. In some respects, it's a bit like staying on an overnight train, perhaps, but it's very nicely appointed. Again, these accommodations are simple, where you can see all of the lights there on those sort of carriages, in inverted commas. That's the bar and dining area. One of the great you're in polar bear territory from dawn till dusk, and there will be polar bears playing in and around Tundra Lodge itself during the day. This is to be fair, this is a very unusual scene of so many. How many are there? 2, 6, 8, 10 polar bears it would be quite unusual to see quite so many, but a rather special sight nonetheless. When you're out looking at the bears, you'll be in these rather extraordinary vehicles, these tundra vehicles, tundra rovers, which are tall, they're high, with large vehicles, large wheels, I beg your pardon. They're beautifully warm. They can seat about 25 or 26 people, but more often than not, there's only 16 or 18 people on board. We are offering there are some special photographic departures where there's even fewer people on board. And generally speaking, you would go out, you would spend the entire day out and about looking at polar bears. This particular photograph, this fellow here is actually, and where the point that this photograph was taken from is actually on Tundra Lodge itself. And the polar rover effectively docks with the Tundra Lodge, so you don't have to go down to ground level and then climb back up again. It's a sort of a seamless transfer. Just a couple more shots of the bears and the rovers, and then some shots quite specifically of the polar bears themselves, because that's really what we're going to Churchill in order to see. So I guess it's fair to say that in some respects the trips that we're offering to Churchill are really single species trips. The chances of not seeing polar bear, I would have to say, are incredibly slim. And there are one or two other nice things to see as well when you're there. Arctic fox and ptarmigan being amongst them, and the possibility of snowy owl and one or two other things. There are one or two other things to do when you're there. We generally try and incorporate some dog sledding whilst you're there, which is quite fun. That would be a half day thing to do. That is great fun. And there is also the opportunity, probably it would be on your last day, perhaps your last morning or last afternoon, there would also be the opportunity to do one of the helicopter trips. On a helicopter trip that I did when I was there a few years ago, the helicopter will land right next to the tundra vehicles. On one of the helicopter trips that I did, I think we had a staggering 36 polar bears in the space of about half an hour, which was pretty fantastic. So another amazing place, and again, something well worth doing. So to another snowy, chilly part of Canada, and again, a place which I touched upon when we were looking at Canada 2 or 3 weeks ago. And this is up into the Yukon, Ice Bears of the Yukon. What a phenomenal place, what a phenomenal trip. What an amazing part of the world and an amazing part of Canada. In order to get here, we fly firstly into Vancouver, where we overnight, and then we fly north to Whitehorse, which you can see there in the southwestern corner of the Yukon Territory, and we overnight in Whitehorse as well. There's not a great deal to be said about Whitehorse, to be fair, other than the fact that it's a town in the Yukon. And then we fly north to Dawson City, where we again spend another night. And generally speaking, we will give you a couple of nights in Dawson City, possibly 2 to 3 nights in Dawson City, because from Dawson City, you go due north to Bear Cave Mountain, but you do that by helicopter. And that's a 2.5 hour helicopter ride on a Jet Ranger. And that's enormous fun. But because the weather is so changeable, you can't necessarily get out on the day that you plan to get out. So we always try and give you 24 or 48 hours in Dawson, just in case you can't get out on the first day. You might have to get out on the second day. Dawson's a great place, by the way. It's a real frontier town. It's a gold rush town. It's an extremely wacky place. They are still mining for gold there. It's a very interesting place to visit. There's one or two interesting bars and restaurants, and it's a place worth visiting. As I say, the journey north from Dawson to Bear Cave Mountain is about 2 to 2.5 hours. It's the most fabulous helicopter ride, I think, perhaps that anybody could do. You are flying over an extraordinary tundra wilderness, which I'm afraid this image just simply doesn't do justice to. And given that it's 2.5 hours in a helicopter, I would strongly recommend not having too many cups of coffee before you fly. You then come close into camp, and you land on the riverside in the chopper, and you land very close to camp. One of the incredible things about this particular place is that it's a wilderness area of about 6,500 square kilometers, but only 6 people, only 6 individuals are allowed into this place at any one time. Those 6 people are the guide and the cook and 4 guests, and that's it. No one else is in this wilderness. It's just the 6 of you and 6,500 square kilometers. Now, to be fair, you won't get out and see very much of that 6,500 square kilometers, because you'll be staying in these rather lovely cabins, and the main cabin that you can see in front of you here is the sort of bar and dining area, if you like, and behind it, where the white door is one of 2 twin-bedded cabins, and then there's a separate toilet and a separate shower washroom area, and the cabin on the very left of the picture is the guide's cabin. This place is very rich with bears, grizzly bears, and you really don't have to go very far in order to see them. From where the helicopter lands to where these cabins are is probably no more than a couple of 100 meters. And the bears are regularly using the path that I'm standing on in order to take this photograph, and using these trees as rubbing trees. And generally speaking, what we will do from here is go to one of 2 or 3 spots, and we will literally sit by the side of the river and watch and wait for the bears to appear. It is curious that for some reason the water here is rather warmer than it is in other parts of Canada, and that's because of a spring nearby. And although it might be -14 or -15 outside, the water isn't nearly that cold. The river is still running, and the salmon are still running. The time to come here is October, November. But of course, with it being -14 or -15 outside, as soon as the bears come out of the water after having fished for salmon, their fur immediately freezes. And they really do just look absolutely beautiful. And you can get unbelievably close to them. They will walk within 3 or 4 meters of you. They've never been predated here. They are interested only in feeding, because of course they are readying themselves for winter. And it really is a photographer's, it's just wonderful, really, really wonderful. And I would highly recommend it. It's not an easy place to get into, as you can imagine, because it only accommodates 4 people, and it has a very short season. It's only a few weeks. So we're looking 2 or 3 years ahead in terms of availability. And then at the end of your week or 10 days or however long you are here, because that is variable just depending on your requirements and what the availability is that they have. A helicopter will arrive with another 2 or 3 people, or perhaps 4 people, and we will collectively unload first of all, and then reload the helicopter, and then we will take off and head back down to Dawson City. The helicopters don't have enough fuel to keep them going for the 2.5 hours up and the 2.5 hours back, so the helicopter will stop somewhere en route where the helicopter pilot has previously put jet fuel, and you'll stop. It will be another unbelievably remote location. He will have put a couple of barrels of fuel down in the middle of nowhere, stop. We'll have a chance to get out and stretch our legs, and the chopper pilot will refuel and we'll head on, but not before we've had a look at 1 or 2 tracks. And this, of course, is clear indication that there are wolves in the area. We didn't see them, but there are wolves here, which in itself is a rather nice and exciting thought that they might be visible. From here, we are going to go to the Taku River. And again, we looked at Taku River before, but we'll just look at that now in a little bit more detail. So once again, we fly into Vancouver and have to spend the night. Not that that's a problem, because Vancouver is a super place to spend the night. We then go to Whitehorse again and spend the night, and we drive to Atlin, which you can see is immediately south of Whitehorse. And we then, from Atlin, fly by helicopter into the Taku River. And the Taku River has 6 cabins. So again, it can only take a small number of people, sort of 8 to 10 people. The cabins are simple. You can see that they have a rather nice wood burner. So the cabins are lovely and warm. You have somewhere to hang your clothes, and you have a very comfortable bed. You will also see that there's an air horn in the event of problems. And there is a lovely veranda and dining lounge area. All of the paths, with 1 or 2 exceptions, in and around this place are kept very much for the bears. So I had to get special dispensation in order to jump down here and take this photograph. But it will become significant later on. So the food here is outstanding. The accommodation is simple. This place is only open for 6 weeks of the year, and the bear viewing here is outstanding. Grizzly bears are prevalent. There are many bears here, just depending on, of course, how lucky you are or otherwise. You should see quite a few bears, and they literally patrol the river up and down in front of the camp. And you can get incredibly close. Look at the claws on that. You wouldn't want to get the wrong side of a bear like that. But again, as with Bear Cave Mountain, these bears have never been predated. So they're really not bothered about us at all. All they're interested in is feeding. This particular bear is a bear called Sunshine. It's a female, and we knew, because we'd seen her the previous 2 or 3 days, we knew that she liked to walk along the other side of this fallen tree. So we set ourselves up in order to watch her. Again, we're with professional guides and guides that know these bears, and they were very comfortable having us this close. But we set ourselves up knowing but on occasion, she decided she was going to do something slightly different, and in actual fact not walk the other side of the log. She walked our side of the log, nonchalantly past us, maybe 5 or 6 feet away. And then a little bit later in the day, came back to camp, where she spent quite a lot of time. In actual fact, Phil, who was our guide here, had been telling me that a few days previously he'd been doing some digging because he needed to dig a hose pipe or something into the ground. One of the pipes that was coming from one of the cabins, he needed to dig that into the ground. It had somehow or other emerged, and he was digging and felt that there was a bear very close by. He was a very confident chap and very confident with the bears. There was a bear very close by, and in actual fact, this bear, Sunshine, was standing right next to him. And as he was digging with a spade, with a sort of a gardener's spade, the bear was standing right next to him, digging the same soil, only a few feet away. The bears here really are amazing. They are wonderful to see. They're very relaxed. And as I say, they're not interested in us. All they are interested in is eating. I said that that deck that I showed you the photograph of was significant. And this is the reason why it's significant. We're sitting on this deck, and I was standing exactly where that bear is standing when I took the photograph of the deck. You can see that on the right-hand side of this picture, there's someone that's actually photographing the bear with their iPad. It was that close. There were people taking pictures with their, or there were only half a dozen of us there, but photographing with phones and so on as well. It's a tremendous, tremendous place to visit and a tremendous place for bears. I am going to just give you a very, very quick whiz. I've only got a few images of British Columbia, but it's such a beautiful place, and it's such a beautiful place to visit, regardless of where else you have been in Canada. Of course, you can fly into Seattle in the United States of America in order to visit British Columbia, or you can go into Calgary and pick up a car and do a self-drive, or go by train even across the Rockies on the Rocky Mountaineer, or you can fly into Vancouver. But I just thought I would remind you of some of the places that you can stay. There are some beautiful bear viewing lodges, Spirit Bear Lodge being one, or Night Inlet Lodge in Glendale Cove being another. But equally, you could stay aboard one of these magnificent boats that accommodate 16 people, Island Roma or Island Odyssey. And there are one or two others as well. But so the accommodations here are tremendous. The whale watching in British Columbia is also tremendous. Orcas, of course, but many humpbacks. And thanks very much, Nick Garbutt, for this amazing drone shot of humpbacks bubblenet feeding. There's some lovely bird watching, of course, throughout Canada, but in British Columbia too. There is a very, very rich cultural heritage throughout Canada, and particularly visible, I would say, depending on where you are, of course, but in British Columbia. This is on Haida Gwaii, the islands of Haida Gwaii off the northwest coast of BC. And of course, there's bears. We've looked at polar bears, we've looked at grizzly bears. They're very gingery coloured grizzly bears. Here are more grizzlies that are much, much darker in colour. Then there are, of course, black bears. And then there are, of course, spirit bears. So I'm going to leave you, if this works, it may not, so forgive me if it doesn't, but I'm going to leave you not with grizzly bears or, not with black bears or spirit bears, but if this works, I'm going to leave you with 30 seconds of video taken on the Taku River of a bear called Sunshine that I mentioned before. What a beautiful animal. And look, if anybody has any questions, then I should be delighted to answer them, if indeed I can.
Chris, that was wonderful. Wow, what a great presentation. And to all of you who are still with us, all 147
Still awake.
of you, yeah. I think you will see why Chris is Mr. Canada. And Chris, we're thoroughly looking forward to parts 3 and parts 4 of the presentation as well.
Oh,
Something
good gracious.
that there's an awful lot more to discover about Canada besides these wonderful areas. And I think you've posed a big problem, a nice problem for a lot of people to have, which is, crikey, which one of those wonderful areas do you choose to visit? It's I've certainly got my favourites there, and I'm particularly keen. You know, I love self-drive, and I'm particularly keen to take my family over to Bay of Fundy in St. Lawrence. Wow, that looks amazing there. It really does look great, and so accessible as well.
Oh yeah, it's fab. We went there with the kids. It's a lovely family place. That was one of the reasons why I showed the shot of the camping, actually, because it's a really super thing for families to do.
Yeah, it just looks great and so accessible as well. So listen, before we get into a few questions, and we do just have a handful of questions. We're not overloaded. Sure. We just one or two. I just thought I would do this poll with everybody now while we've got you all. So what we're going to do, we just want to ask you a simple question, and it's going to come up on the screen. And basically, we would just like to hear from you if you're interested to receive from us information about any of the tours that we offer to the various parts of Canada. And if you visit our website, Wildlife Worldwide, or the Travelling Naturalist, you'll see that there are many trips on offer in Canada. We've got lots of group tours, we've got lots of self-drives, and this selection here is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
There's loads more beside, but it will give you an idea of what's on offer in each of these areas. And once you've let us know, the trips that you'd like to hear from us regarding, we can send you that information, and then we can talk to you about some of the other options that are available there as well.
Yeah,
is there anything you want to add to that, Chris?
No, not really. I mean, I think we selected what I tried to do before this presentation was select a trip that was representative of each of the different places that I was going to be talking about this evening. That was the idea. It wasn't that they are the only trips that we offer in those places, and of course, as you rightly said, we tailor make. But with the idea, I just thought it was quite nice just to offer a representative selection of trips.
That's
so
great.
Yeah, plenty of others, but that's not a bad selection.
No, that's brilliant. Hey, so thanks for everybody. I'm gonna end that there. That's fine. We've had a good response there, so thank you. What I'm going to do now, Chris, I'm going to ask just a few questions, if that's okay.
Far away.
Some of them are pretty straightforward. Some of them may be a little bit harder.
When you ask me the easy ones.
Straight in early, and I did actually answer this during the presentation, but I just thought I would ask it of you anyway, so that everybody else gets to hear it. Maria posed the question early on in the presentation. As soon as you had finished talking about Bay of Fundy and St. Lawrence area, she was keen to know whether or not we've got group tours that go there, particularly 2022, 2023. And my immediate answer to her was that, well, look, we are continuously developing more and more product, sure. And there will be more coming up. What we've got there on the website is obviously we've got 4 or 5 different self-drive options there, which, and as you've seen from Chris's presentation, it's a brilliant area for self-drive, very straightforward, very accessible, and very easy to do, with a whole range of accommodation choices as well. But I did, to specifically answer Maria's question, I did point her towards one group tour that we have going to that area, and that is Grand Manan's Coastal Wonders. So it doesn't go to all of those areas, but it touches on that kind of vicinity, that region, and it's a lovely trip to do in the summer. I think Chris, you've self-driven there as well, but I think you were kind of behind putting that trip together back on your trips there, weren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Grand Manan is phenomenal. There's some fantastic. I mean, the whale watching from Grand Manan goes out into the Bay of Fundy. Yeah. There is the possibility of seeing North Atlantic right whales from there, though they're generally a little bit further north. So from Grand Manan, we are tending to see Atlantic white-sided dolphin and humpback whales. I was there, many of you on board will know Mark Cordine. Mark and I have been there together. I've been there a number of times previously, but Mark and I were there together 2 or 3 years ago. We had something like 150 white-sided dolphins, and at a certain point, I think we had about 75 or 80 humpback whales. It is absolutely fabulous. Fabulous. Yeah. Grand Manan's a really super place. I mean, you get on a ferry. It's a bit like, in a funny sort of way, a bit like getting on the Isle of Wight ferry. But we had whales. We were looking at whales as we were going across on the car ferry. Brilliant. It's super, really super. It's a lovely place to stay.
Yeah. So Maria, I've sent you a link to the page on our website specifically about that trip. It's worth you looking at some of the self-drive options as well, if that's your thing. And naturally just keep an eye on our e-news and on our website, because Dan, and I know that many of you have spoken with Dan, and he looks after wildlife worldwide on a day-to-day basis. He's the manager of Wildlife Worldwide, and he's kind of headlong into developing all sorts of products. So do keep an eye on the website and our e-newses. But it's a good start to pretend though. Grand Manan's Coastal Wildlife. Great. Okay, a similar question again, Chris, and this is one that I'm not too sure of. But Peter, thanks for your question. Obviously taken by Pond Inlet, who wouldn't be? My God, what a remarkable place. Again, asking, are we developing group trips out there, or is it more of a tailor-made thing?
That's more of a tailor-made thing. We have discussed the possibility of doing Pond Inlet as a group option. The risks for us are quite high. Again, just sort of being completely open with everybody that's on board the presentation. The risks for us are quite high of running that as a group tour, because it's because of the cost side of things, I guess. And just the way things work, it's actually slightly easier for us to operate that on a tailor-made basis. And we work with a local company, and we work with a local operation that actually set up the tents and everything for us. So, but keep your eyes open. There may well be a group tour to Pond Inlet coming up, but we can operate trips to Pond Inlet on a tailor-made basis, May, June, anytime. That's the time to go, May, June, and it's brilliant, Peter. It's a fantastic place. One of the most exciting things I think I've done in many years was going there.
Yeah, I have to say it looked thrilling, the whole experience, and often it's the case, isn't it, with wildlife viewing in these wonderful specific places. It's actually the journey of getting there as well that just adds to the whole story and the whole experience. Yeah, as with Yukon, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I might just add, Nick. I think there may well be a number of people interested in doing Pond Inlet as a group tour. I mean, I sort of throw it out there. We haven't actually put one of the Pond Inlet tours actually on that poll. But if you are interested in visiting Pond Inlet, you are interested in doing it as a group, on a group tour, please message us. Message Nick, message or email Nick or me, or Dan for that matter, or our wildlife team, and let's see. We'd be delighted to do it. It's a fantastic place. I'd be very, very happy to set it up as a group trip.
Yeah, absolutely right. If there's the interest there, I mean, there's still 130 people. So if anybody is interested in that, just drop us a message on the chat, or drop us a message on the question, and we can put something together. That's very straightforward to do. So look, Chris, I've got another question here. This is a more of a scientific question. And I know the answer, but
Oh,
I'm
Lord.
going to let you answer it though. It's from
That's my
Alison.
test.
Alison, thanks for this question. This is a good one. Okay, so Chris, your whale knowledge is required now. Is there a particular time when the whales breach, or is it just when they fancy it?
You got it in one. Well, I think that the real answer to that is that nobody actually knows the answer. So to an extent, it's when they fancy. There have been all sorts of suggestions as to why it might be. Some people say that it's in order to get rid of whale lice and the whale ticks which they have. Some people have hypothesized that it's in order to display strength, etc. Nobody really knows. Nobody really knows. I suppose at some stage that people will find out an answer, or will work out an answer. But I think the answer is that no one knows the answer at the moment.
I hope we don't. In many respects, I hope we don't find out the answer, because I personally love the idea of particularly the humpbacks, which seem to be some of the most playful and flamboyant. Just doing it because they can and they love to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, why not? I mean, when we well, you've seen it as well, Nick. When we see the young grey whales in San Ignacio Lagoon, it really does just look as though they're jumping for joy. Yeah. And I've seen orcas doing it, and I've seen humpbacks doing it. Why not? We sing and run and cycle and do things to please ourselves. Why wouldn't they do the same?
Exactly. There you go. So a good question there from Alison. Thank you for that. I'm going to finish up with one more question here. So Dee has joined us from British Columbia, I hasten to add. She's there now. Happy to say that I left England to live in British Columbia many years ago. Truly a great place, so come and visit. There you go. Thank you, Dee. She wants to know that, Chris, could you just remind her, where did you film the Bear Sunshine? I think it was Taku River, was that?
Sunshine was in the Taku River, yeah. So we fly into, ultimately we get to Atlin, basically, and then we helicopter in to Taku River from Atlin. It's about 45 minutes by helicopter south of Atlin. Fantastic place to go to, Dee. I would strongly recommend it.
Yeah.
I'd organise it for you.
So another question. Sorry, I did say that I was winding up, but the questions now starting to roll in now. A quick question from a solo traveller, Marie. Thanks for yours. Is solo travel possible on all the trips presented? Yes, it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely 100%. Right.
100%.
We're not huge fans of single supplements, but unfortunately, we do have to pass those on from our suppliers. We don't mark them up. It's just not something that we're particularly keen to do. But yeah, solo travel is absolutely possible with us on any of our trips. That's not an issue at all.
Yeah.
And then we've got a couple of bits of interest from people wanting to join a pond inlet trip. So watch this space on that, everybody. Thank you. And then Shyam, as numbers are limited, especially to the polar bear trips, how many trips are offered per year? Well, there's quite a number of places that we do the polar bear trips, aren't there?
Yeah, there are. I mean, the stuff that I was showing, of course, was Churchill. I mean, they're operating October and November. Yeah, numbers are limited, but the reality is that there are polar bear trips going to Churchill pretty much every week throughout
polar bear capital, isn't it?
Polar bear capital. I mean, it's true. I mean, and we work with an absolutely superb local operator there. There are not only weekly trips where you would be staying in Churchill itself, but there are weekly departures where you'd be staying on the Tundra Lodge, that rather sort of curious looking train type lodge, which I love staying in. I think it's fabulous. One of the reasons why I particularly like it, incidentally, about 8 in the morning, whether you're staying in Churchill or whether you're staying at Tundra Lodge. And the cool thing about staying at Tundra Lodge is that you've basically got about an hour and a half of cruising around looking at and photographing bears, polar bears, before the Tundra vehicles get to where you are when they've left Churchill town. So you've kind of got an hour and a half at the beginning of the day where there's fewer vehicles, and an hour and a half at the end of the day where there are fewer vehicles, which is really super.
Very good. So there we go, Chris. That's all the questions. I think that we've been through all of those. If none have come in lately, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Yep.
I would say that if anybody wants to ask me anything directly, you are very, very welcome to. If you don't have my email address, it's pretty simple. My name is Chris, as you may have ascertained, and the company is Wildlife Worldwide, which I know that you know, and my email address is chris@wildlifeworldwide.com. You're very, very welcome to email me and ask me anything about Canada, or anywhere else for that matter.
Thank you very much for that, Chris. And to all of you who have stayed with us and submitted questions, thank you all very, very much for that. Thank you to those of you who have opted to hear more about a pond inlet group tour. There's several of you that have asked for that, so that's great. So watch this space on that. John, you've just snuck in with one final question. I'm going to do it. This is going to be definitely the last one. Hi, as bears have good sense of smell and are drawn to food, how do campsites deal with this? Bears are very powerful and tents are flimsy.
Okay, I think this is probably reference to Taku River and Bear Cave Mountain, and that's my guess, John. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think that's probably your reference. In essence, we are not allowed to go out with any food item at all in our pockets on our person. We simply don't have anything. You couldn't have a sweet in your pocket or a raisin or anything. And we're not allowed to have any food in our cabins, absolutely nothing at all. The food is kept entirely in the in the eating and dining area, and it is absolutely slick, and there is no way that anyone is allowed to have any food, and it is drilled into us within seconds of arrival at camp. So that's the way it's dealt with. Yes, you're absolutely right, John. Bears are unbelievably powerful. Tents and cabins are flimsy, but you don't have any food in those locations.
Follow the simple, strict guidelines,
yep.
And that's the way it works.
Yeah, and that's that. Yeah.
Very good. Excellent. Well, listen, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see from the slide, our new brochure that came out in January is now 4 months old, but it's still got packed full of some great holiday ideas. You can email Chris if you wish directly at the email address that he gave you earlier. If you wish to email me, then you may do that as well. I'm quite simply nick@wildlifeworldwide.com. If you have a general sales inquiry, sales@wildlifeworldwide.com, or you can telephone us and speak to us. We love talking to people. It's what we like to do. And we've got more events coming up. So if you haven't already, then do sign up for Discover Europe's Bears. We've got an in-depth talk specifically about the wildlife of the Pantanal. And then we've also got a fabulous talk. I think this is with Alex Hyde, isn't it? It
is, Alex, on Wednesday. It's on Wednesday.
That is one not to miss. Alex is absolutely brilliant, and his photographs are quite remarkable. So there you go. What a lovely, lovely way to go into the Easter bank holiday. All that remains for me to say is to stay safe, look after yourselves, look after each other, have a wonderful Easter. And we will hopefully see you all again next week when we resume our Discover Wildlife evenings. Thank you all very much indeed, and good night.
Thanks a lot. Good night.